Jake woke up to the sound of ice crystals crackling in the wind. The first thing he noticed was that he wasn't cold anymore. In fact, he felt surprisingly warm and rested, like he'd spent the night in a heated room instead of a frozen wasteland. The second thing he noticed was that Elena was already awake, sitting up in the sleeping bag with her back turned to him. "Good morning," Jake said, stretching carefully in the cramped space. "How are you feeling?" Elena didn't answer right away when she finally turned around. Jake was surprised to see her face was flushed with embarrassment. Her eyes darted away from his, and she seemed to be struggling with something. I need to tell you something," Elena said quietly, "about last night, about how we survived." Jake sat up, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" "We shared body heat in the sleeping bag. That's basic survival." "No, it's not that simple." Elena's voice was shaking, but not from cold this time. "Jake, I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am, about what I am." The way she said what I made Jake's stomach tighten. He'd been wondering how Elena had survived 3 days in the cold when her suit was clearly damaged. Now it seemed like he was about to get his answer. "I'm listening," Jake said carefully. Elena took a deep breath. "My grandmother was part of the first generation of genetic enhancement experiments. Back in the 2340s, when humans were just starting to colonize the outer planets, the government was looking for ways to help people survive in extreme environments." Jake felt his world shift slightly. Genetic enhancement wasn't illegal, but it wasn't common either. Most enhanced humans lived in specialized colonies, away from the general population. He'd never met one before. The enhancement was designed to help with temperature regulation, Elena continued, to let humans survive in places where normal people couldn't. "My grandmother passed some of those genes down to my mother, and my mother passed them to me. What kind of abilities are we talking about?" Jake asked, though he was starting to understand. "I can slow down my metabolism when I'm in extreme cold," Elena explained. "My body temperature drops, but not dangerously, more like hibernation. I can survive for weeks in conditions that would kill someone else in hours." Jake stared at her. "You were hibernating when I found you?" "I was starting to, yes." Elena's voice was barely above a whisper. "My body was shutting down non-essential functions to conserve energy. If you hadn't found me, I would have stayed like that until the weather improved or someone came looking for me." "But that's amazing," Jake said. "You could have survived on your own." "Why do you look so upset about it?" Elena's face crumpled. "Because I think I might have hurt you. When you got in the sleeping bag with me, my body didn't shut down like it was supposed to. Instead, it started absorbing your body heat. I was unconscious, but my enhanced metabolism was pulling thermal energy from you all night." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "You mean you were stealing my heat?" "I don't know," Elena said, and now she was crying. "I've never tried to hibernate with another person before. I've never even told anyone about my abilities. I was so scared and cold that I couldn't think straight. When I woke up this morning and realized what might have happened, I felt sick." Jake looked at her carefully. She seemed genuinely distressed, but he wasn't sure what to think. Had she really been unconsciously draining his body heat? Was that why he'd felt so warm and comfortable? "Elena, look at me," Jake said gently. "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I slept better last night than I have in months. If you were taking my heat, it didn't hurt me." "But what if it could have?" Elena asked. "What if I'd taken too much? What if I'd killed you without even knowing it?" Jake could see the fear in her eyes now. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Elena had been carrying this secret her whole life, afraid of what her abilities might do to other people. "How long have you known about your enhancement?" Jake asked. "Since I was a teenager," Elena said. "My parents told me when I started showing signs, but they made me promise never to tell anyone. They said people would be afraid of me, that they'd think I was some kind of freak." "Is that why you became a researcher, studying life in extreme environments?" Elena nodded. "I thought if I could understand how other creatures survived in impossible conditions, maybe I could understand myself better. Maybe I could find a way to control my abilities instead of being controlled by them." Jake thought about this. He'd always believed that humans were most human when they helped each other. But Elena's story suggested something more complicated. What did it mean to be human when you had abilities that other people didn't, Elena? "Can I ask you something?" Jake said. "When you went into hibernation mode, did you have any control over it?" "Not really," Elena admitted. "It's mostly automatic. When my body temperature drops below a certain point, the enhancement kicks in. But last night felt different. It was like my body was confused about what to do because you were there." Jake nodded slowly. "What if that's not a bad thing? What if your body was trying to find a way to keep us both alive?" Elena looked at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Jake said. "You said your body was absorbing my heat, but I felt warmer than I should have. What if instead of stealing my heat, your enhancement was somehow sharing it, making it more efficient?" Elena's eyes widened. That's not supposed to be possible. The enhancement is designed for individual survival, not for helping other people." "Maybe that's because no one ever tried it with another person before," Jake suggested. "Maybe your grandmother's generation didn't have the chance to discover what the enhancement could really do." Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering this. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked finally. "Should I be?" Jake asked back. "Most people would be, having abilities that other people don't have. It makes you different, potentially dangerous." Jake thought about his own experiences. He'd spent years flying cargo ships through dangerous space, helping colonies survive in hostile environments. He'd seen what humans could accomplish when they worked together, and he'd seen what happened when they let fear drive their decisions. "Elena, you could have let me freeze to death," Jake said. "You could have gone into hibernation and saved yourself. Instead, you tried to warn me about the potential danger. That doesn't sound like someone I should be afraid of." Elena looked at him with something like hope in her eyes. "So what do we do now?" Jake stood up and looked out across the frozen landscape. The gas giant was setting on the horizon, which meant they had maybe 12 hours before the temperature dropped even further. "Now we figure out how to survive until rescue comes," Jake said. "And maybe we figure out what your abilities can really do when they're not being hidden away." Elena stood up beside him. "You really think we can work together, even knowing what I am?" Jake smiled. "Elena, I think we're going to do more than just work together. I think we're going to discover something that could change how humans survive in space forever." As they packed up their makeshift camp, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that their survival last night had been about more than just shared body heat. Something had happened in that sleeping bag, something that neither of them fully understood yet. But instead of being afraid, Jake found himself curious. After all, the best discoveries in human history had always come from people who were willing to explore the unknown, even when it seemed dangerous. And right now, Elena Chen was the most unknown thing in his universe. The next 2 days changed everything between Jake and Elena. Working together to survive on the frozen moon, they discovered that their differences weren't weaknesses to hide, but strengths to share. It started with the communication equipment. Jake's distress beacon had been damaged in the crash, its screen cracked, and the signal weak. Elena studied the device with the careful attention of someone who'd spent years analyzing complex systems. "I think I can fix this," she said, running her fingers over the broken circuits. "But I'll need steady hands and good light. The wiring is incredibly delicate." Jake watched her work, impressed by her focus and skill. "You're good at this. Is this part of your research background?" Elena smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "My enhancement doesn't just affect temperature regulation. It also slows down my heart rate and steadies my hands when I concentrate. It's actually perfect for precision work." "That's incredible," Jake said. "You've been seeing this as a burden, but it sounds like a gift." "I've never thought of it that way," Elena admitted. "Growing up, I was always told to hide what made me different. But maybe being different isn't always bad." While Elena worked on the beacon, Jake explored the crash site for useful materials. He found pieces of hull plating that could be shaped into a windbreak, insulation material that was still intact, and even some heating elements that might work if they could find a power source. "You know," Elena said during a break, "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday. About my body sharing heat instead of stealing it. Jake looked up from the metal he was bending into shape. What about it? I've been monitoring my temperature all morning, Elena explained. It's staying warmer than it should be, even though we're both active and burning energy. It's like my metabolism is working more efficiently when you're nearby. How is that possible? Jake asked. Elena shrugged. I don't know, but I have a theory. What if the enhancement wasn't just designed for individual survival? What if it was meant to help groups of people survive together? Jake thought about this as he continued working. That would make sense. Early colonists always travel in groups. An ability that helped everyone survive would be more valuable than one that only helped individuals. Exactly, Elena said excitedly, but the enhancement was abandoned before they could test it properly. The government decided it was too risky. Too risky how? Jake asked. Elena's expression grew serious. Because they were afraid enhanced humans would become a separate species. That we'd stop being human altogether. Jake stopped working and looked at her. Elena, do you feel less human because of your abilities? Sometimes, she admitted quietly. When I was younger, I used to wonder if I was some kind of experiment that went wrong. If I belonged with regular humans at all. What changed your mind? Jake asked. You did. Elena said simply, last night, when you shared your sleeping bag with me, you didn't care what I was. You just saw someone who needed help. That's the most human thing I've ever experienced. Jake felt something warm spread through his chest. Elena, can I tell you something? I've been carrying guilt for years about people I couldn't save. Every time I fly a cargo run, I think about colonists who died because supplies didn't arrive on time. Every time I hear about a ship that didn't make it, I wonder if I could have done something different. Elena stopped working on the beacon and gave him her full attention. That's why you risked your life to save me, isn't it? Not because you're reckless, but because you can't stand the thought of losing someone else. Maybe, Jake said. But saving you didn't feel like a risk. It felt like the only choice I could live with. That's exactly what I mean, Elena said. You chose to help someone, even when it might have cost you everything. That's not the behavior of someone who's less human because of their abilities. That's the behavior of someone who's more human because of their choices. They worked in comfortable silence for a while, both of them processing this conversation. Jake found himself thinking about what Elena had said about her enhancement possibly being designed for groups. If that were true, it would explain why she'd survived 3 days alone, but seemed to thrive when they were together. Elena, Jake said eventually, what if we tested your theory? What do you mean? She asked. What if we deliberately tried to see how our combined survival abilities work? Not just sharing heat, but really working together as a team. Elena looked nervous. That could be dangerous. What if I accidentally hurt you? What if you accidentally save both our lives? Jake countered. We're already in danger just being here. At least this way, we might learn something useful. Elena considered this. What did you have in mind? Jake pointed to a section of wreckage about 100 meters away. There's a power cell over there that might still work, but it's in the middle of an area where the ice is unstable. One wrong step and you could fall through into the water underneath. So we need someone with enhanced reflexes and temperature resistance to retrieve it, Elena said. Understanding. And we need someone with experience in dangerous environments to plan the approach and provide backup, Jake added. Elena nodded slowly. A team effort. Exactly. You use your abilities, I use mine. We trust each other completely. They spent the next hour planning the approach. Jake studied the ice patterns and identified the safest path, while Elena tested her ability to consciously control her enhanced reflexes. When they were ready, they moved together like they had been partners for years. Elena's enhanced coordination allowed her to navigate the treacherous ice with confidence, while Jake's experience helped him spot potential dangers before they became problems. When Elena's foot broke through a thin section of ice, Jake was ready with a rope to pull her to safety. When Jake slipped on a patch of smooth ice, Elena's quick reflexes caught him before he could fall. They retrieved the power cell successfully, and more importantly, they did it without either of them getting hurt. In fact, Jake felt more alert and capable than he had in years, while Elena reported feeling more confident and in control of her abilities than ever before. This is amazing, Elena said as they made their way back to camp. I can feel my enhancement. Working with your natural abilities instead of against them. I feel it too, Jake said. It's like we're bringing out the best in each other. That evening, as they worked to connect the power cell to the communication equipment, Jake realized something important. He'd spent years flying alone, thinking that independence was strength. But working with Elena had shown him that true strength came from connection, from trusting someone else enough to let them help you. Elena seemed to be having similar thoughts. Jake, she said as they tested the repaired beacon. I've spent my whole life hiding who I am because I was afraid of how people would react. But you've shown me that the right person won't be afraid. They'll be grateful. Elena, Jake said. I think we've discovered something more important than just how to survive in extreme conditions. I think we've discovered how to help each other become more than we could be alone. The beacon crackled to life, sending out a strong signal that would reach the nearest rescue station within hours. But as they sat together in the shelter they built, Jake realized that being rescued was no longer his primary concern. He was more interested in what would happen next. When they could explore this partnership in a safer environment, Elena seemed to be thinking the same thing. Whatever happens when we get off this moon, she said, I want to keep working with you. I want to see what else we can discover together. Jake smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. The storm warning came through on the repaired communication system at dawn on the 5th day. Jake stared at the readout, his heart sinking as he processed the numbers. Elena, you need to see this, he called out, his voice tight with concern. Elena hurried over from where she'd been organizing their supplies. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. Minus 120 degrees? That's impossible. The weather station doesn't lie, Jake said grimly. There's a massive storm system moving in from the north. It'll hit us in about 6 hours. And it's going to last for 3 days. Eleanor ran her hands through her hair, thinking fast. Our shelter won't hold up in that kind of cold. The wind speeds alone would tear it apart. Jake nodded. They built a decent windbreak from the ship's wreckage, but it was designed for normal weather, not the kind of storm that could kill them in minutes. We need to find better shelter, or what? Elena asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Or we need to try something we've never done before, Jake said quietly. We need to see if your hibernation ability can work for both of us. Elena's eyes widened. Jake, I told you, it doesn't work that way. The enhancement is designed for individual survival. Having another person's body heat and metabolism interferes with the process. But what if it doesn't have to interfere? Jake asked, what if we can make it work together, like we did with everything else? Elena shook her head. It's too dangerous. If something goes wrong, we could both die. At least if I hibernate alone, one of us survives. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. You're talking about me leaving you here. I'm talking about you finding shelter somewhere else while I go into hibernation, Elena said. When the storm passes, you come back for me, Elena. There's no other shelter. We've explored every piece of wreckage, every ice formation within walking distance. This is it. Elena was quiet for a long moment, staring at the storm warning. Then maybe you should try to reach the mining colony. You could make it. If you left now, Jake stared at her. Are you serious? I'm not leaving you here alone. Jake, be practical, Elena said, but her voice was shaking. If we both stay, we both might die. If you go, at least you survive. And if I go and something happens to you, I spend the rest of my life knowing I abandoned someone who trusted me, Jake shot back. That's not survival, Elena. That's just existing. Elena turned away from him, her shoulders tense. This is exactly what I was afraid of. My enhancement puts other people in danger. You should have left me where you found me, Elena. Look at me, Jake said gently. When she turned around, he could see tears in her eyes. Do you really think I'd be better off if I'd never met you? You'd be safer, Elena said. Would I? Jake asked. Elena, these past few days have been the most alive I've felt in years. Working with you, seeing what we can accomplish together, it's shown me something I'd forgotten. What's that? Elena asked quietly, That life isn't about just surviving. It's about finding people worth surviving with. Jake moved closer to her. I'm not leaving you. Elena, we're going to figure this out together. Elena wiped her eyes. Jake, you don't understand. My hibernation process isn't just about slowing down my metabolism. It's about my body shutting down everything except the most essential functions. If you're there, generating heat and movement and activity, it confuses the system. What if that's not a bad thing? Jake asked. What if your body is trying to adapt to a new situation? Elena looked at him with confusion. What do you mean? Think about it, Jake said. Your enhancement was designed decades ago, when humans were first learning to survive in space. But you're not the same person your grandmother was. You've grown. Up in a different world, with different experiences. Elena nodded slowly. Go on. What if your enhancement has been evolving too? What if it's learning, just like you are? Elena's eyes widened. You think the enhancement is adapting to work with other people? I think it's adapting to work with the person you've become. Jake said, someone who cares about others, who wants to help instead of just survive alone. Elena was quiet for a long moment, processing this idea. That's a huge risk, Jake, if you're wrong. If the hibernation process fails because you're there, we both die. And if I'm right, Jake asked. Elena took a deep breath. If you're right, then maybe we discover something that could change how humans survive in space forever. Jake smiled. Those sound like pretty good odds to me. The storm hit for hours later, earlier than predicted. Jake and Elena barely had time to secure their shelter before the wind started howling across the ice. Within minutes, the temperature plummeted beyond anything they'd experienced. It's now or never, Elena said, her voice barely audible over the wind. They climbed into the sleeping bag together, just like they had on the first night. But this time, Elena didn't try to fight what was happening to her body. Instead, she focused on the warmth and steadiness of Jake's presence beside her. I'm scared, Elena admitted as her heart rate began to slow. I know, Jake said, holding her close. But we're not doing this alone. We're doing it together. As Elena's breathing became deeper and more regular, Jake felt something he'd never experienced before. It was like her calmness was spreading to him, slowing his own heart rate and making him feel incredibly peaceful. Elena, he whispered, I think it's working. Elena's eyes fluttered open. I can feel it too. It's like my body is creating a protective space for both of us outside. The storm raged with deadly fury. The wind screamed across the ice, and the temperature dropped to levels that would kill an unprotected human in seconds. But inside the sleeping bag, Jake and Elena existed in a bubble of warmth and safety. This is incredible, Elena said softly. I've never felt so in control of my abilities, and I've never felt so safe in a dangerous situation. Jake replied as the hours passed. They talked quietly about their lives, their fears, their dreams. Jake learned that Elena had always wanted to explore the furthest reaches of space, but had been afraid her enhancement would make her unwelcome on long-term missions. Elena discovered that Jake had once dreamed of helping establish new colonies, but had convinced himself he was better off working alone. When we get out of here, Jake said during the second day of the storm, I want to apply for a deep space exploration mission, and I want you to come with me. Elena smiled. I'd like that. But Jake, what if other people aren't as accepting as you are? What if they're afraid of what I can do? Then we'll show them what we've learned, Jake said. That being different isn't something to fear. It's something to celebrate. The storm finally began to weaken on the third day, as the wind died down and the temperature started to rise. Jake and Elena emerged from their shelter to find a transformed landscape. The ice formations had been sculpted into new shapes by the wind, creating a strange and beautiful world. We did it, Elena said, looking around in wonder. We actually survived. We did more than survive, Jake said, taking her hand. We proved that humans can adapt and grow beyond what they think is possible. As they stood together in the aftermath of the storm, both of them knew that their lives had changed forever. They discovered something that went beyond mere survival, something that spoke to the very heart of what it meant to be human. They learned that the greatest strength wasn't in being independent, but in being willing to trust someone else completely, and in that trust, they found a partnership that could take them anywhere in the universe. The rescue ship appeared on the horizon 3 days after the storm ended, its hull gleaming against the ice-blue sky. Jake and Elena watched it approach, but neither of them felt the relief they'd expected. Instead, there was something bittersweet about seeing their time on the frozen moon come to an end. "Ready to go back to civilization?" Jake asked. Though his voice suggested he wasn't entirely sure he was ready himself, Elena smiled. But her expression was thoughtful. "I'm not the same person who crashed here a week ago. Are you?" Jake considered this as the rescue ship touched down about 50 meters from their shelter. "No, I'm not. The question is, what do we do with who we've become?" The rescue team was efficient and professional. They checked both survivors for injuries, recorded their statements about the crash, and prepared them for transport back to the nearest space station. But Jake noticed something during the medical examination that made him exchange glances with Elena. "Your vital signs are remarkable," the medic told Jake. "For someone who's been stranded in extreme conditions for a week, you're in better health than most people who've just finished a vacation." "What do you mean?" Jake asked, though he suspected he already knew. "Your cardiovascular efficiency is off the charts," the medic explained. "Your stress hormone levels are lower than normal, and your immune system is functioning at peak capacity. It's like your body has been optimized for survival." Elena squeezed Jake's hand as they listened to this assessment. They both understood what had really happened during their time together, but explaining it to others would be complicated. During the flight back to Kepler Station, Jake and Elena sat together in the rear of the rescue ship, speaking quietly, so the crew couldn't overhear. "The medic was right," Elena said. "Something did happen to you during the hibernation process. I can feel it." "Feel what?" Jake asked. "Your body temperature, your breathing patterns, even the way your heart beats. It's all synchronized with mine now." Elena looked amazed and slightly worried. "Jake, I think my enhancement didn't just protect us during the storm. I think it changed you." Jake had been wondering about this himself. Ever since they'd emerged from the sleeping bag after the storm, he'd felt different. More aware, more connected to his environment, more in tune with Elena's presence beside him. "Changed me how?" he asked. "I'm not sure," Elena admitted. "But I think you might have developed some of the same temperature regulation abilities I have. Not the full enhancement, but maybe a compatibility with it." Jake thought about this. "Would that be a bad thing?" Elena shook her head. "I don't think so. But it means we're not just partners anymore, Jake. We're something new." When they reached Kepler Station, the first thing they did was request a private meeting with the station commander. Commander Torres was a veteran of deep space exploration, someone who'd seen enough unusual situations to listen with an open mind. "Let me get this straight," Torres said after hearing their story. "You survived conditions that should have killed you by developing some kind of shared hibernation ability?" "That's right," Elena said. "And we think this discovery could revolutionize how humans survive in extreme environments." Torres leaned back in her chair. "Dr. Chen, according to your file, you're a xenobiologist specializing in extreme environment adaptation. Is this some kind of research experiment?" Elena shook her head. "Commander, my genetic enhancement has been a secret my whole life. I never intended for this to happen. But now that it has, I think we have a responsibility to share what we've learned." "What exactly are you proposing?" Torres asked. Jake spoke up. "We want to volunteer for a long-term deep space mission, somewhere dangerous, where our abilities could be tested and studied properly." Torres raised an eyebrow. "That's quite a request. What makes you think the Space Administration would approve something like that?" Elena pulled out a data pad and showed Torres the readings she'd been taking of their vital signs since the rescue. "Because our survival rate in extreme conditions is now approximately 300% higher than normal humans. We're not just asking for a mission, Commander. We're offering a breakthrough." Over the next several weeks, Jake and Elena underwent extensive testing at the station's medical facility. The results confirmed what they'd suspected. Jake had indeed developed a partial version of Elena's enhancement, but only when they were in close proximity to each other. Dr. Patel The chief medical officer was fascinated by the data. This is unprecedented, she told them. It's like Ms. Chen's enhancement learned to share itself. We've never seen anything like this adaptive capability in genetic modifications. What does this mean for us? Jake asked. It means you've become the first successful human partnership optimized for extreme environment survival, Dr. Patel explained. Your combined abilities are greater than the sum of your individual parts. The implications were staggering. If Jake and Elena's partnership could be understood and replicated, it might open up entirely new possibilities for human space exploration. Planets that were currently too dangerous to colonize might become accessible. Deep space missions that were considered impossible might become routine. But more importantly, at least to Jake and Elena, it proved something they believed from the beginning, that humans were strongest when they worked together, when they trusted each other completely, when they were willing to share not just their resources, but their very selves. 6 months later, Jake and Elena stood on the observation deck of the deep space exploration vessel New Horizons, watching the stars stream past as they headed toward the edge of known space. They'd been assigned to a mission that would have been considered suicidal for normal crew members, establishing a research station on a planet where the temperature fluctuated between extremes. That could kill an unprotected human in minutes. Nervous? Elena asked, though she could feel through their connection that Jake was actually excited. Not with you here, Jake replied. I can't imagine doing this with anyone else. Elena smiled. You know, when I was growing up, I always felt like my enhancement made me less human. But now I think it made me more human, more capable of connecting with others. How so? Jake asked. Because true humanity isn't about being perfect or normal, Elena explained. It's about being willing to share yourself with someone else, to trust them completely, to become something greater together than you could ever be alone. Jake nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. And that's what we are now, isn't it? Something greater together. Much greater, Elena agreed. As their ship continued its journey toward the unknown, Jake reflected on how much his life had changed since that first night. When he'd shared his sleeping bag with a freezing stranger, he thought he was just saving someone's life. But instead he discovered something that could change the future of human space exploration. More than that, he learned that the greatest discoveries in life weren't about finding new worlds or new technologies. They were about finding the right person to share the journey with. Someone who could bring out the best in you while you brought out the best in them. Elena seemed to be having similar thoughts. Jake, she said softly, thank you. For what? He asked. For showing me that being different isn't something to hide. It's something to celebrate. Jake took her hand, feeling the warmth and strength that flowed between them. Elena, you showed me something even more important. What's that? You showed me that the best way to survive isn't to become stronger as individuals. It's to become stronger together. As the stars continued to stream past their observation window, Jake and Elena stood together at the threshold of a new frontier, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. They'd learned that true human strength didn't come from enhanced genetics or advanced technology. It came from the willingness to trust another person completely, to share not just resources, but hope, fear, dreams, and the fundamental belief that together, humans could overcome anything the universe had to offer. Their story had begun with a simple act of kindness on a frozen moon, but it had become something much larger, proof that humanity's greatest superpower wasn't the ability to survive alone, but the ability to transform each other through love, trust, and unwavering partnership. And as they headed toward their new mission, both Jake and Elena knew that their greatest adventures were still ahead of them.